What's up, everybody? We welcome you to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. It's the sports book born in Vegas, and this is the Friday edition for Week 14. Week 14 gets off to a pretty good start. This is exactly what we were hoping for. Detroit 34, Green Bay 31. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for every player in this game, and we will talk about it. We'll also preview 6 games on the NFC home game side. We've got Seattle, Arizona, Chicago, San Francisco. I'll ask these guys to rank the wide receivers in that game. Atlanta at Minnesota, Carolina at Philadelphia. Who's a better flex this week, Chuba Hubbard or Devontae Smith? Cincinnati at Dallas. We didn't get to that one yesterday. And the game of the week, the Saints at the Giants. Okay, Jamie, hi.
Are you okay? Are you safe?
For now, yeah. So everybody, you should watch and listen to the mailbag. If you saw it last night, you already know what happened. But
I didn't watch it.
I was interrupted in the middle of the Fantasy Cop segment by a troubling sound right above me. Which, yeah, no, I don't know what it was, but it sounded like a fairly big, maybe squirrel, running around. And it happened.
Not iguana.
No, too cold for iguanas here. But the really trouble is that it's not, it's not the roof above me. It's a storage closet in my daughter's room. So it really freaked me out. And I think you'll enjoy the
Candyman,
which I have queued up, which we'll get to later. But first, Detroit 34, Green Bay 31. The Packers had the ball for about 24 minutes. Jordan Love threw 20 passes. Josh Jacobs ran 18 times. All right. I'm gonna put 2 wide receivers together here. They're in different, starter sit tiers. But now that we're getting to the fantasy playoffs, how concerned are you, Dave, about Jaden Reed, who did not have a catch yesterday? Did he have a catch? He did not, right?
He did not. He had a target.
One target, 0 catches. And how concerned are you about Amon-Ra St. Brown, who has now 12.2 or fewer fantasy points in 3 straight games?
Still going to start Amon-Ra St. Brown every week. Still figure that he's going to be a regular part of the Lions offense. And we can't say the same for Jaden Reed based on how he's been rolling outside of the game 2 games ago. He played 50% of the snaps. He ran 15 routes. That's it. Adam, you noted before the show, and you watched it during the game, the Packers ran a lot of 2 tight end formations. That took Reed off the field in a bunch of times and snaps, and that's not what we were expecting. I don't feel very comfortable calling him anything more than a flex moving forward. We're through the buys. You should have enough receivers to sit Jaden Reed unless there's compelling evidence otherwise.
And not only did they run a lot of 2 tight end sets, I mean, this was their lowest rate of 3 receiver sets, highest rate of 2 tight end sets all season. They were in 3 receiver sets about, I think it was like 44% of the time. It was something crazy low. So was that a game plan? That's just what they decided. It doesn't really make a lot of sense against Detroit, but that's what happened. It's frustrating.
To me, it makes perfect sense. We knew that the Detroit D-line was banged up going into the game. They probably figured that they could run the ball a little bit more. You put 2 tight ends out there to get an extra blocker, and you could also have those guys run a route if you use play action.
I don't know.
To me, it made sense that they used more 2 tight ends. We probably should have dialed into that a little bit more. The problem is that we could have said before the game, okay, yeah, they might use more 2 tight end sets. Does that hurt Tucker Kraft? Does that help Jaden Reed? I'm not sure we would have landed on.
How could we have possibly predicted that they would be in a season high of 2 tight ends?
Because of what I just said, because we knew that that Detroit's defensive line was a weakness going into the game.
I mean, I get it, but still their defensive line did really well against the run. I know Jacobs had 3 touchdowns, but he struggled. And they still started with Aleem McNeil, who did leave the game with a head injury.
I think
but you can throw on Detroit, as we've seen the last.
I think part of the problem was that whatever their game plan going in worked. And the hope for Jaden Reed, which I think is going to be the case most weeks, is that their game plan doesn't work and they're falling behind and having to throw a little more. Because that's been a little bit of an issue for them moving forward, is that they haven't been throwing as much. And I mean, you look at Jaden Reed's targets, they haven't been there. And that's somewhat of an issue. And you're also talking about a game where one of their star receivers, if you want to call Romeo Doubs a star, but he's one of their contributors, did not play. And so if you were to say going into the game, the weakness of the Lions is their pass defense. No matter what the injuries may be, the weakness of the Lions is still their secondary. The strength of the Packers receiving core, or the best Packers receiver, the one we trust the most, is Jaden Reed. You're expecting a back and forth game. Vegas told us that. It ended up being that. You look at the score. You would have said this is the perfect setup for Jaden Reed with Romeo Doubs not playing.
Yeah.
And
So what happens when Romeo Doubs comes back?
So that's part of the issue is there's another mouth to feed. I've said this from the beginning of the season, and it's played out twice, in terms of numbers. That their most explosive receiver is Christian Watson. When you see what he does, he's different than anybody on the field. Jaden Reed makes big plays. He should have had a big play against the Dolphins on the first throw. He had a couple of touchdowns, obviously. So he's a big play threat also. Not the same type. He's a big time threat. He's not a big play threat like Christian Watson is. So when Watson is doing things like this, it opens up everything for the offense. It just didn't open up things for Jaden Reed last night. It opened up things for Tucker Kraft. It opened up the run game a little bit more. Dontavian Wicks had a couple of nice catches. So this is the issue with the Packers receivers moving forward. There's a lot of mouths to feed, and there's just not one consistent go-to guy.
The other issue is that they are now, over the last 4 games, because over the last 3 games, they had the second highest run rate, second lowest pass rate in the NFL. And I really just thought, well, they're 3-0 in these games. They've been ahead big in 2 of them. They're going to have to throw. Well, maybe they're just a run team now, which is surprising to say. I didn't think we'd say that about the Lions, but they're kind of a run team. I mean, a little bit more balanced, but we do have to think about that going forward. Is this team just going to be run heavy? All right. So on the other side of the ball, unless you just want to say, are you going to trust Tucker Kraft, by the way, when Romeo Doubs gets back? Because obviously he's had a big boost in targets the last 2 weeks.
When you talk about that position, again, you're looking for someone who's productive. And so Laporta had a really good game last night, just didn't score. So 5 for 54 targets were there. Like you'll take that for what he's been giving you because the chance to score is always there. So I think Laporta is a little bit, to me, safer than Tucker Kraft right now, but not by much. But when you start to get to Evan Ingram and Cade Otton and Will Dissly and Kyle Pitts and, continue down the line of, wherever you want to stop, he's been so productive over the course of the season. Like, I'm not chasing tight ends if I have Tucker Kraft.
I agree with that. The problem that I have with Kraft is that he has 3 games this year with 6 or more targets. And that's always the number that I look for when I want to start a tight end. I want somebody that's going to get targeted. He had a great game last night. He had 5 targets. It feels a little uneasy to go with Tucker Kraft because of that. But you're right. There's no reason to go scanning for tight end streamers when you've got Tucker Kraft.
The only one I may consider, just because of the schedule, is Jake Ferguson. That's the closest one.
Sure.
And
that's 6+ targets on the regular.
And it's somewhat, I think, unfair to call him a streamer. He just was dropped because of the injuries.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Who do you think was started in more leagues, Goff or Love?
Love.
Goff by 4%. 70% started for Goff, 66 for Love. Love scores 16.5 fantasy points. Goff scores 28 fantasy points.
And by the way, a terrible pass interference call on the Jacobs touchdown.
Which one?
The offensive pass interference call.
You're right.
Oh, the one that would have been right on Christian Watson. All right, so Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery score 19.3 or 19.4 fantasy points. It just worked out so nicely. But David Montgomery has 3 or more catches in 5 of his last 6 games. That's David Montgomery I'm talking about, not Jahmyr Gibbs. It's crazy. St. Brown, the only thing I want to say about St. Brown here, because I get it, I'm absolutely going to start him if I advance in the one league I have him in. His target share the last 3 weeks is 21.2%, 22.6%, 15%. So it's not just like it used to be. They don't throw much, but he gets so many targets. He gets 30% of the targets. Now it's Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta.
Right.
Yeah. So
we've seen Laporta has at least 6 targets in each of his last 3 games. Jameson Williams has at least 7 targets in each of his last 3 games. Right. So St. Brown's losing that grip a little bit, and it's coming back to sting. He's still going to be a number 1 fantasy receiver, but he might be toward the bottom of that group. Top 12, not top 5.
All right. We'll talk more about these guys next week when we preview their game against Buffalo. Oh, that'll be fun.
That will be fun.
Okay. So Sunday, you know what to do. You can join us on YouTube at youtube.com/fantasyfootballtoday, live at 11:30 a.m. Eastern until kickoff, where we answer your questions basically for about 85 minutes. It's a lot of fun and I think very helpful for our audience. youtube.com/fantasyfootballtoday, which is where you can also watch all of our podcasts, including this one from yesterday. Here we go. Take a look, Dave. Give me your reaction here to the mailbag. And this guy hasn't set his lineup, and the commissioner told this manager, or it doesn't even have to be the commissioner. This other guy told this manager to set his lineup because I'm facing him and he needs me to lose and this and that. You know what I mean? This is kind of the same thing. It's a bit of a gray area to me. I don't know that I consider this collusion. It's worse that it's the commissioner.
Queued up the wrong.
If it hadn't been the commissioner, would. Oh. Do you hear that?
You Adam Gase?
Oh my gosh!
I have no idea what's going on.
Oh my God! You turned Adam Gase at the press conference.
The funniest part about that was your face. The second funniest part is that if you're watching on YouTube, Jamie's laughing both in real time and in the video.
Yeah. You know, it was probably Jamie somehow sneaking into my apartment, my house, to scare me. All right, news and notes.
Face from when you got scared 2 weeks ago was much better than that face, but that's still a very funny Azer face.
Yeah, I've been giving people a lot of material these days.
Oh my God! And it's in your daughter's closet. That's creepy.
I don't know. It could possibly have been the roof. I'm praying that it was.
Could it have been your daughter? Like, could she have gotten out of bed and like?
No, she was past that. She was asleep at that point. Okay, news and notes. So there's a lot here. Okay, so Aiden O'Connell mispracticed with an illness. He should be okay. Another Raiders note: Madison limited again. Zamir White mispractice. We talked about that game yesterday, but let's talk about the big misses of practice. Ken Walker mispractice. Breece Hall mispractice. Bucky Irving mispractice, and both Bears running backs mispractice. So Jamie, I'm going to give you the running backs: Ken Walker, Breece Hall, Bucky Irving, and Roshan and DeAndre Swift all missing practice. Have you made any moves to pick up backups?
I did Tuesday on a couple of these in some 10-team leagues where Braylon Allen was still available, just because it seems like there's a chance that Breece Hall may get shut down with the Jets out of it, and he's limping through practice and the game last week as well. Zach Charbonnet was someone we listed in the waiver wire column because he was under 65% rostered, so he should be added as one of the high-end handcuffs because we saw what he did earlier this season, and we know what he's capable of when Ken Walker's not there. Sean Tucker is the one that's widely available right now, and so you have the opportunity to get ahead of it in your leagues to pick him up and just see what happens if Bucky does miss practice. Now, the one thing about that is clearly Braylon Allen is a featured guy if Breece Hall's not there. Zach Charbonnet is a featured guy if Walker's not there. Tucker is still probably the second guy because Rachaad White will get more touches, so you just have to understand that you're not getting a slam dunk, I think, starting running back, but given 6 teams on a bye, he's pretty close to it. So I would like to have Sean Tucker rostered if I have the ability to stash somebody. Travis Homer's not somebody that I'm so interested in, but clearly would get a bump. So where you're thinking potentially of like an Amir Abdullah, if there is no DeAndre Swift and no Roshan Johnson, Travis Homer is going to be more of a pass catcher than necessarily a featured back, but still get the opportunity for maybe 15 total touches. I would guess it'd be a lot on Caleb Williams' plate. Is it Felton, the other guy they have on the roster?
They've got Demetric Felton, the former UCLA scat back, and Darrington Evans. Remember, he was with the Titans for a little bit. Yep. He's bounced around the league. The Bears have reliably used 2 running backs pretty much every week, and I don't see how they view Travis Homer as an every down guy. So I would guess Evans ahead of Felton as the back to pair with Travis Homer, but I'm going to stay away from both of them against the 49ers with their defense getting healthy. That's a no from me. Dog.
Yeah, I mean, but desperate people. Desperate man.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I have a league where I have 2 running backs, and one of them is Ken Walker. And I have Roshan Johnson on the bench, and I have Ramondre Stevenson on a bye on the bench, and neither Tucker nor Homer is available, so I'm screwed. I would easily pick one of them up if I could.
Go get Sincere McCormick.
He's not. I don't think he's available either. It's one of our leagues
from hell.
No, it's one of our. It's our Superflex league. Everyone's rostered in our leagues. All right, wide receiver. So let's go to the wide receivers that have been injured. Ladd McConkey limited again. didn't commit to playing. He's basically said, I'm going to do everything I can to be out there. But the fact that he's been limited twice is a good sign. Unfortunately, that's a Sunday night game for McConkey. Cedric Tillman missed practice again, so that's disappointing, and he's not trending in the right direction. CeeDee Lamb missed practice. It was their first practice of the week. Right now, Lamb looks like what I read was he's expected to play. But we've got DK Metcalf. We got Mike Evans, Jacoby Myers, and DJ Moore missing practice. So, Dave, looking at McConkey, Lamb, Metcalf, Evans, Myers, DJ Moore, which ones are you concerned about not playing this week?
I'm concerned about Metcalf. I'm concerned about Evans. I would give Myers another day. And then the last one was Moore. I'm concerned about Moore as well. Now, with Moore, to expect a lot of targets to shift to Odunze and Cole Kmet, but Keenan Allen will still be the top target getter there. Without DK Metcalf in Seattle, if he were out for the game, then Tyler Lockett would probably spring into action as someone that you could start. Evans being out, I would defer to Jamie on this one because you've been on top of the Bucs wide receivers. But if he doesn't play, this is Cade Otton going off all over again, I would think. But one of those other receivers for Tampa could step up and be a decent replacement, I guess. And I wouldn't trust anybody other than Brock Bowers. Maybe if I'm desperate, Trey Tucker for the Raiders in their matchup against Tampa. And obviously that's a matchup you want to attack because that Bucs defense is so bad against the pass.
Yeah, let's hope all these guys play. I mean, that's the best situation.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, tight ends, Dallas Goedert missed practice again, so we're not expecting him. Josh Oliver, I mentioned, he practiced. He's going to play for Minnesota. Jatavian Sanders trending in the right direction. Dalton Kincaid, limited. Are you guys ranking Kincaid at this point?
Not yet.
And
I would guess that he'll practice again on Friday, and then he'll make the rankings.
Jake Ferguson practiced in full. He's going to be good to go, Jake Ferguson. Feel comfortable with that? Jake, you can okay.
Yeah.
All right. Trent Williams and Aaron Banks missed practice, 2 starting offensive linemen for the 49ers. Zach Martin, Cowboys offensive guard, he's out for the season now. He's missed the last 2 games. They can still run on the Bengals, who don't have Logan Wilson for the rest of the season, most likely, without Zach Martin.
He had surgery on his knee. He's done.
Orlando Brown, left tackle for the Bengals. He is doubtful for Monday's game. Peter Skoronski, left guard for the Titans. He got in a limited session. Tristan Wirfs, the Bucs left tackle, he missed practice. And both the Saints and the Giants in that game could be dealing with injuries on their offensive line, although the Giants' tackles were limited yesterday. Still no Sauce Gardner, right? He missed practice again?
Yep.
Told you, don't start Evan McPherson at kicker. You might want to I took Jamie's advice. I put Will Reichard on my IR spot, the kicker for the Vikings. Nick Bosa missing practice again. So you said the Niners defense is getting healthier. Is that just Diamador Lenore you're talking about?
It's Bosa, it's Lenore. Hufanga might play. Drake Greenlaw has been practicing. Like, they could legitimately get 4 starters back this week.
Oh, okay. No, Bosa did not practice yesterday.
I thought he practiced on Wednesday. If he's out, that obviously helps Chicago's passing game.
Yeah, he's still listed as a DNP, Nick Bosa.
All right, I thought he was back at it. My bad.
The other guy's coming back. Seattle's getting maybe their best pass rusher back, Uchenna Nwosu. He hasn't played this year, and I'm going to leave it at that. We're going to take a break, and we've got one question for each game when we come back on Fantasy Football Today. Watching on YouTube, I don't know that Killer song, but it's good. I'm gonna have to. Bright Lights, maybe it's called. What do you think it's called? What do you think it's called, Dave? You think it's called Bright Lights?
I think it's called We Should Get to One Question for Each Game.
Okay. It's called Bright Lights. All right, one question for each game. Seattle at Arizona. Is there a player that you like in this game other than Trey McBride?
Jackson Smith and Jigba.
My bad on the typo there. That is totally on me.
You wrote in the notes, is there a player you live in this game?
Yeah, my bad. Is there a player you live in this game other than Trey McBride? No, actually, I didn't mean to write like. I meant to write love. That's what it was. Is there a player you love in this game other than Trey McBride?
Same answer.
Yeah, JSN. You're obviously starting both running backs just given the situation. and you're probably starting DK Metcalf. But to answer your question, yes, the only other one besides McBride would be Jason.
Did DK slip into flex territory for you, Jim? He did for me.
I mean, yeah, we did a whole show about it yesterday day before I said I'm sitting him, and he's ranked in the 30s.
What show did we do yesterday?
HQ, where I had him as a sit.
Oh, all right, I was zoned out. My bad.
Chicago at San Francisco. Rank the wide receivers in this game.
DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Juwan Jennings.
Yep.
Deebo Samuel, Tyler Lockett, Ricky Pearsall.
Tyler Lockett.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I still had Seattle in my head. Let me rephrase. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Juwan Jennings, Deebo Samuel, Rome Odunze.
I'll go with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Rice. I like your order. I think it's good. I'm hoping that DJ Moore practices on Friday. He could have a very good game again.
See, why start Keenan Allen over Juwan Jennings?
Well, I mean, targets. First off, what he's gotten since Thomas Brown has taken over.
Yep.
Production since Thomas Brown has taken over. Matchup, I think, is a little bit more in his favor. And I don't feel like we're 100% certain that Brock Purdy's 100%.
Okay. Atlanta at Minnesota. Start or sit Darnell Mooney?
3 receiver leagues must start. 2 receiver leagues depends on who you have. He's in that 20 to 30 range.
He's a little bit lower than that for me, but same type of deal. Someone that could be a boom bust flex as a number 3.
I would start him over DK Metcalf.
But would you
start higher.
I'm sorry. It's Darnell Mooney we're talking about. Would you start Mooney over Juwan Jennings?
Nope.
Yes.
A yes and a no. All right. Carolina's at Philadelphia. Who's a better flex? Chuba Hubbard or Devontae Smith?
Smith.
Yeah, I am nervous about Chuba Hubbard. This is going to be a tough matchup and potentially a tough game script for him. We could see him benched in the fourth quarter of a blowout and Jonathan Brooks getting reps. I love how competitive that Carolina's been over like the last 3 games, but I don't see them being as competitive against this team this week. So there's more upside with Devontae Smith than there is with Chuba Hubbard.
Cincinnati at Dallas. Which tight ends are you starting Jake Ferguson over? You have Jake Ferguson ranked ahead of blank.
TJ Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts,
All the streamers.
I had
Dude,
him ahead of Kraft. That's probably going to be a mistake.
Yeah, I did too.
Actually,
I
all
have
right.
Evan Ingram as well.
Play this game. Ready? Tucker Kraft yesterday, he scored 13.1 fantasy points. Would you start Ingram over that, or would you take 13.1? I'm sorry, I said Ingram. Would you start Ferguson over that, or take 13.1?
I would take 13.1 over Ingram and
Ferguson.
Ferguson.
Wouldn't surprise me if Ferguson had more, but it wouldn't be by a lot. So I would take the 13.
I mean, the one thing Ferguson hasn't scored a touchdown yet this season.
New Orleans is at the Giants. Who's a better flex, Tyrone Tracy Jr. or Malik Neighbors?
Tracy.
I'll take Neighbors in PPR.
Okay. What's the best app out there? Well, let's talk about BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code FANTASY, and you're going to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app, and you sign up using the bonus code FANTASY. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up on BetMGM. Before we get into the games, I want to take this time to thank everybody for listening to us on Spotify and sending us your Spotify Wrapped screenshots. Spotify Wrapped is really fun just to see what you've been listening to throughout the year. So I had a good time with that yesterday. Believe it or not, Fantasy Football Today was also my #1 most listened to podcast. But I do want to thank our entire audience. But for those of you sending the screenshots of Fantasy Football Today as your #1 podcast, the dedication that some of you have is just really incredible, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Were you thanking me for?
I'm thanking the audience.
Okay.
What do I have to thank you for?
Well, it sounded like you were
putting yourself in the group of people that I was thanking.
I'm adding my gratitude to yours.
Good. A lot of gratitude today.
Dork.
In fact, wait. Oh, gratitude. That's the word of the game when we get to Atlanta at Minnesota. You may not know what I'm talking about, but you will soon. All right, Arizona and Seattle. Let's start with that one here. And the Cardinals, stat of the game number 1, they have the most sacks in the NFL over the last 5 weeks.
Yep.
Despite having a bye. So they've only had 4 games, and yet over the last 5 weeks, they have the most sacks in the NFL. So I know you guys do not like Geno Smith for many reasons. How about this? The stat of the game number 2, the last 4 running backs against Seattle. Kyron Williams scored 10.5 PPR fantasy points. McCaffrey scored 14.6 on 23 touches. James Conner scored 9.9, and Breece Hall scored 6. Starter sit James Conner this week, Dave Richard.
Makes me nervous. He hasn't looked good the past few weeks, nor has the Arizona offensive line. That's been a big problem for their passing game as well as the run game. I do like the targets that he's been getting, and you got to hope that that continues. I've got him as a low-end number 2 fantasy running back. If this were a week where no one was on bye, he would be out of my top 24. But since there's 6 teams out there, I think that James Conner probably still qualifies as a top 24 guy. I am reluctantly starting him in a number of my leagues.
Jamie, who are you starting more confidently, Ken Walker or James Conner?
I mean, assuming he's healthy, Walker, but it's not easy for both these guys. Like, I like Rico Dowdle better than both. I like Tracy better than both. I like Arendo better than both. So it's tough for both sides of this. In terms of the matchups, it's tough for the way these guys have been performing. Clearly, Ken Walker's not 100% healthy, so you got to take that into account. And now you maybe have a high end flex in Charbonnet, just knowing that we saw him get some goal line opportunities last week and converted one of them. And he may get a few more additional touches. So if you are scrambling like you are, Adam, and not finding a Charbonnet on the bench, but maybe you have Charbonnet on the waiver wire, but you have Charbonnet on your bench, you might be able to get some low end production, but good replacement options just in case you're stuck.
Oh man, I would start Charbonnet with confidence. I don't have him in that league, but I do have him in a few leagues, and I would put him. I'd be the most excited about Charbonnet in this game, if Walker were out. As we always say that.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if Walker plays. You may have an opportunity here because Walker's not 100% to use him as a potential starter if you're in a situation like you are where you're scrambling for someone of significance. You don't have anybody that's a safe starter.
Charbonnet played 44% of the snaps last week, dominated third downs. That helps him with his targets and catches, although he was light in that against the Jets. But inside the 5, Walker had 4 or 5 of those snaps. Charbonnet's touchdown was from 8 yards out. I agree. I think he's a decent desperation RB if Walker plays, and if Walker doesn't play, then he's a must start.
Yeah. All right. How are we feeling about Marvin Harrison Jr.? Well, let's just talk about all the wide receivers. Jamie, rank the wide receivers in this game. Top 3.
Tyler Lockett's in this game, right? JSN would be 1. Marvin Harrison would be 2. DK Metcalf would be 3. And there's no really anybody else to trust.
And unfortunately, when we just saw what Seattle looks like without DK Metcalf, and it didn't do anything for Tyler Lockett. He still had 3 or 4 targets in those 2 games. So if Metcalf doesn't play, I don't think we can really look. It's 6 teams on a bye. You might be desperate, but I don't think we're going to be saying you got to go pick up Tyler Lockett, right? Because he just hasn't done anything.
Correct.
And this Cardinals defense is playing really well. Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, you mentioned some running backs that you like better than James Conner and Ken Walker. Jamie, you said Tyrone Tracy, Isaac Garendo. Do you like them better than Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I do. Yeah.
Same.
The thing that I hope for is we got the report before the game last week that they were going to feed Marvin Harrison, and they did. 12 targets. That's awesome. So forget about what he did with them. You still got a good game out of it. If you give a player of his potential and his talent opportunities, even in a tough matchup, you're starting it. So let this be the norm. Let this be what we see rest of season. Give Marvin Harrison the chance to make plays. Give him 8+ targets weekly. So 12 is probably unrealistic, but both these defenses, as the season has progressed, have definitely gotten better. So Seattle getting healthier the last couple of weeks. You've seen it. Their secondary has been much better. Arizona, I mean, just awesome what they've been able to accomplish. Pass rush, secondary, everything has just been really, really solid. So it's going to be a fun fight to the finish between these 4 teams in the NFC West. And these 2 defenses are certainly carrying their own weight. And we saw it 2 weeks ago when they met in Seattle.
See what the total is on this game here. It is 44.5, which is not so great. It's okay. Cardinals are 2.5 point favorites. All right. I guess we can just kind of go back to this game and compare players that we talk about in the future, but we didn't talk about Kyler yet. So starter sit Kyler Murray, Dave.
I'm hesitant, very nervous about him being able to have a big game against this defense. Jamie just talked about Seattle improving. Their pass rush has gotten better. Their defense against outside wide receivers over the last 3 weeks has been phenomenal. They're not allowing a lot of yards after the catch. They've only allowed 1 touchdown to outside wide receivers. That's a red flag for Marvin Harrison. And I'm not sure how Arizona is going to be able to put up a ton of points in this game. One way they could do it is if Kyler Murray just runs a lot. And that's been something that he's done sporadically. I think if you start Kyler Murray, I think you've got to hope that he does get 8-9 carries, finds the end zone on one of those long runs, and then throws another touchdown. But otherwise, I think he's just going to check down to Trey McBride a lot and hope that McBride can move the chains.
Dave said the word sporadically. Name the 90s movie that features the word sporadically. The line is, I hope it's not sporadically.
Clueless?
Yeah, Jamie with the win. Way to go. All right, I'm finished with this game. Trey McBride, start him and sit Noah Fant. Oh, how about the DSTs? You like the DSTs?
Cardinals over Seahawks, but yes.
Yeah, I don't mind them.
No, I like the Cardinals.
Yeah, I do too. They're both top 10 for me.
Let's go to Chicago at San Francisco. Stat of the game. Caleb Williams is one of only 4 quarterbacks to score more than 23 fantasy points against the Vikings. And he is the only quarterback to score more than 22 fantasy points against the Lions and the only quarterback to throw multiple touchdown passes against the Lions. So he hasn't beat up on these bad opponents. He's actually put up big numbers against teams that have been pretty good against quarterbacks. And here comes San Francisco. They're 12th against quarterbacks. A little unlucky last week with Josh Allen getting a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown. But all right, Caleb Williams, 2 straight games with more than 30 fantasy points against Minnesota and at Detroit. How do you guys feel about him, Jamie? Caleb Williams, starter sit.
Yeah, low-end starter. For me, he's my favorite quarterback in this game. I would start him over Kyler. I'd start him over Geno. I'd start him over Stafford. There's not a lot of, I think, major names this week that, go beyond that. But he's playing well, and it started the first game with Thomas Brown when we saw the 70 yards rushing. He just looks more confident. It clearly coincides with the tackles coming back also, so that's huge that he's getting better protection. Now, if you don't have DJ Moore this week, that clearly lowers the ceiling for Caleb Williams, but I still think he's worth starting depending on who your other options are. So if he doesn't have DJ Moore, he'll probably fall behind, let's say, Will Levis for me as a low-end starter, but I think he'll use his legs if the running game is not there. So there's a lot to like about where Caleb Williams is at right now, and really the struggles of the 49ers defense. That's just it's hard to be still successful when you're losing so many key players.
I'd be more nervous about Caleb Williams if Bosa plays, if everybody's back for the 49ers defense, and if DJ Moore were out. I would feel better about Caleb, and I do have Purdy 1 spot ahead of Caleb right now, but I'd flip it if there is no Swift, there is no Roschon, there is no run game for Chicago. Caleb's going to have to do it all. I would just kind of hope for volume to carry the day for him. I also thought that he went backward a little bit last week. And the first 2 games with Thomas Brown, we saw him get rid of the ball a little bit faster. He didn't throw it far downfield nearly as much. I think he regressed a little bit against Detroit. And I'm wondering how the Bears adjust for that. And how much of an adjustment will there even be if DJ Moore, who's been getting a ton, his ADOT, we've talked about it, has been miserable since the changing coordinators. Like if he's gone, what does that mean for Caleb? Is he still going to try and get rid of the ball in 2.5 seconds, or is he going to start throwing it deep again? That's when he got into trouble earlier this year. No matter how you cut it, he's going to be a low-end starter for me. I'm going to start Jameis ahead of him, Darnold ahead of him, Baker ahead of him, but I'm going to start Caleb over Stafford, Levis, Herbert, Mahomes.
Oh, over Herbert and Mahomes. It's interesting.
I
And by
agree
the
with
way,
Herbert. I'd still start Mahomes over him. And these
Heath
are much
has
higher ceiling.
Heath has Caleb Williams 5th. You guys have him 11th. Okay, so and you're right, Dave. Jacob brought this up on Monday, and I sort of dismissed. I wouldn't say dismissed it, but Caleb did not really play that well. He kind of came on strong late and had some highlight reel plays, but he's running a lot, which is good. 39 rushing yards last week, 33 rushing yards week before that. But no, he struggled throwing the ball downfield. He made some really ugly throws, maybe masked a little bit by the fantasy points, but it is worth noting. All right, Chicago running backs. Would you start a Chicago running? Like, give me a scenario where you're confident in a Seahawks in a Bears running back this week.
Tyler Lockett.
Against a team that gives up 4.1 yards per carry to running backs. And it was actually 3.8 yards per carry before the snow game last week.
I mean, I would start DeAndre Swift if he gets into full practice today, especially if Roshan Johnson's out. So you look at what Swift has dealt with the last 2 weeks, 2 of the best run defenses in football, with the Vikings and the Lions back-to-back weeks. And so prior to that, he had been doing a very solid job. Some of it was touchdown dependent, but I would expect if there is no DJ Moore, that's where the receptions will go for Caleb Williams and probably Cole Kmet as well. So both those guys would probably benefit from the short area passing game. But I think the thing about Swift is throughout those last 2 games, you'd be starting him, no question, especially with what the 49ers have looked like in terms of their run fantasy points allowed to running backs over the last month or so. So with all the injuries that they're dealing with here, I would trust DeAndre Swift, given 6 teams on a bye, as a low-end starter. So James Conner, I think he's in a better spot right now in terms of matchups. I would start him over the Chiefs running backs, the Jaguars running backs.
Wait, who would you start, Conner or Swift?
Swift.
Okay.
If he gets in full practice today.
And is this contingent on Roshan not playing?
It's a big part of it.
But either way, if they both play, you'd start Swift over Conner? Or no?
If Conner and Swift both practice, then I would start Conner over Swift. Excuse me. If Roshan and Swift both practice today, then I would start Conner over the Bears guys. But they would be back-to-back. So that's probably a very small sample size of what we're talking about. But again, those other running backs, the Browns running backs, the Chiefs running backs, the Jaguars running backs, I'm sure there's a lot of the Chargers backfield, so Swift would still be a number 2 running back this week.
All right. DJ Moore is
over Chuba Hubbard.
DJ Moore is a top 20 wide receiver for everyone, assuming he plays. And Keenan Allen is
also top 20.
Not for Heath, but for you guys, he's top 24. Let me get the updated. In PPR, Keenan Allen is 23rd for Jamie. He is 18th for Dave and 28th for Heath. So that's a pretty wide range there, but I can't be Heath. So Keenan Allen is a low-end starter. Rome Odunze is not. Starter sit real quick, Dave. Starter sit Cole Kmet.
If there's no DJ Moore, then I think Cole Kmet can be a streaming tight end. Hope for 8 to 13 PPR points.
This matchup is very tough. This team is very good against tight ends. 4th fewest fantasy points allowed. Brock Purdy. All right, you can go a little bit longer on this one. Starter sit Brock Purdy, Dave.
I don't mind Brock Purdy. I don't think the Bears defense has been as good as it was earlier in the season. This is one of the things that made me like the quarterbacks that they've played against over the past 2 weeks, and I'm going to stick with it. I don't want to hold last week against Purdy, and I don't want to forget about what Purdy looked like before he got hurt. And the fact that he's got what I think is not an easy matchup against Chicago, but certainly one that's not super tough. I don't think he'll be pressured that much. And as much as we love Isaac Guerendo, and I can talk about Guerendo next if you want me to, I still think this offense will fall mostly on Purdy's shoulders, and we could get another 30 to 33 pass attempts out of him. And I think he can have a solid day. So I don't mind him this week. I think he's a low-end starter, back-to-back with Caleb. For now, he is definitely ahead of Caleb, and he will stay ahead of Caleb if there's no DJ Moore and if the run game is there for Chicago, like I outlined earlier.
I'm nervous. I do think he's a low-end starter because 6 teams are on a bye. So he's in that same range as Caleb Williams and Justin Herbert and Matt Stafford and Will Levis. So if he's been your starter, I wouldn't necessarily pivot away from him. But the last game we saw him healthy, not in bad weather, he threw for 159 yards and a touchdown. And so is the shoulder 100% healthy? There is no Trent Williams. That is huge for this entire offense. And so now down 2 offensive linemen potentially, which is not ideal knowing the circumstances. This is still a good defense, whether they've been struggling lately or not. For the season, they have not given up a lot of production to opposing quarterbacks.
Right.
You do have the new coach bump that we always see. So was it a pissed off and Matt Eberflus situation? Who knows? But for whatever reason, that's a tried and true scenario that always happens to teams where they perform better in the first game under a new coach. Look at the Saints a couple weeks ago, for example. They were terrible. So I think you just look at the circumstances. I don't know if he's 100% healthy with the shoulder because he hasn't thrown much in practice, at least to my knowledge. And last week clearly did not make anybody comfortable. No snow. He threw 18 pass attempts, throw 94 yards. So he's got a run. That's been part of what his success has been in the last month. You go back to that Dallas game, for example, he threw 1 touchdown in that game, but he ran for 56 yards and a touchdown. So hopefully his legs show up in this game. I just don't feel like this. And this is one of the more lower score projected games of the week, so everything is just setting up for not a huge game for Brock Purdy. So you want maybe 18 points. I think he can get you there. I don't think he's going to be 25 or more. So low end starter, I think fits the bill.
Okay. Well, how would you compare Brock Purdy to the quarterbacks in the Chargers-Chiefs game?
I like them both better, especially if Vlad McConkey plays. Mahomes.
I like both the quarterbacks in the Bears-Niners game better than the quarterbacks in the Chargers-Chiefs game.
How about Brock Purdy versus, and you can Caleb Williams for that matter, the quarterbacks in the Steelers-Browns game?
I will take my chances with Jameis.
Jameis over both over Russ.
Yep.
Wait, Dave, what did you take your Jameis, but not Wilson?
No, I will take my chances with Jameis over Purdy.
It's the game of the week, yeah! It's the Steelers and the Browns. First game of the week in 3 weeks, baby. It's the game of the week. Hey! Okay, it's been a while. Let's talk about Isaac Guerrero. We've talked about Ken Walker and James Conner and DeAndre Swift. Are we starting Guerrero over all those guys?
Yep. I'm starting Guerrero over a lot of other running backs besides them, too. I'm starting him over Breece Hall. I'll start him over Najee. I'll start him ahead of Aaron Jones. I'm excited. We're talking about a 49ers running back who should be on the brink of at least 15 touches. When you review his film, you see that he is a very good fit for what this scheme is. He's a good zone runner, great cutback ability, good vision to find those lanes and then power through them. He's got some physicality to him. And from the combine that he ran a 4.33 40, and he's like 200 and I don't even know, 220 pounds, 215 pounds. I am very much intrigued and hopeful that Isaac Guerrero can have a solid role for the Niners. I'm hoping that comes to fruition. That could end up hurting Brock Purdy, although we have seen Guerrero catch a few passes along the way this season. So I'm going to bank on the talent, the opportunity. Oh, and the matchup isn't bad either. Chicago's given up like 5 yards per carry, 4 rushing touchdowns to running backs over its past 5 games. That seems pretty favorable too.
Yeah, a running back has 16 or more carries against the Bears in 6 straight games, and for the entire season, they give up 5 yards per carry. The matchup is great. I just think that he's probably going to be like Jordan Mason and barely catch the ball. Mason had 10 catches in 8 games, I think. Is that kind of what you're thinking here for Guerrero? He's going to be.
Again, go back to that Dallas game. He had 3 catches in that game. So does it fit his profile? Probably not so much, but I think what we're going to see is 2 to 3 catches. Remember, when Mason was playing, there were a lot of injuries that the 49ers were dealing with at various times. Kittle missed the game during that stretch. Mason was in and out of the lineup. I think you look at it, Ayuk was healthy at that time for a good portion of those games. They need pass catchers to be successful here. So especially if there's a shoulder problem still for Purdy, we could see some design throws that I think will benefit Guerrero. Is he going to be a 5+ catch guy or McCaffrey? No way. So 3 catches is probably the ceiling.
All right, sorry guys. So I've spent way too much time on this game. Let's finish up your confidence level in Juwan Jennings, your confidence level in Deebo Samuel.
Way more confident in Juwan than I am in Deebo. Juwan is a low-end number 2 fantasy wide receiver. That's in full PPR. Deebo is a number 3. Maybe Deebo picks up a few carries along the way as well. But if he's banged up, and that's kind of something that we've speculated on, then I don't know how many carries he'll end up getting.
If he's banged up, he's saving his best performances for special teams because he looks electric in the return game right now. So I don't think there's an injury that he's dealing with that's impacting him whatsoever from his speed, his performance. It's just he's not scoring touchdowns, which has been mind-boggling. He's got 1 rushing touchdown and 1 receiving touchdown in the season, and it's so frustrating. So will he be more involved in the run game? His season high is 23 carries. He hasn't scored a rushing touchdown since week 1. They need him. They absolutely need him to be the guy that he was at his peak 2021. Like, that's the guy that's got to show up. This team's going to have some better performances offensively, but you can't count on it. So for me, both the receivers are number 3 receivers. Samuel's more of a, hope and a prayer at this point, just because it's been so disappointing. I really think this offense, we can save the debate because it's going to go long again. They're missing their best player. Trent Williams not being there is killing them.
Well, hopefully he can get into practice this week, but he hasn't practiced yet. And I think what's so frustrating about this Bears matchup is, like, they are not a good pass defense. Not anymore. They give up like the 5th most yards per attempt in the NFL, but they see 15 wide receiver targets per game. Nobody throws on them. Like I just said about Garendo, 16 or more carries for a single running back, 6 straight games. Nobody throws on them. So they might just run the ball down their throats.
Well, that's what you saw in the Buffalo game. That's exactly what the game plan was for the 49ers. It was working when McCaffrey was healthy, and then both running backs got hurt and the score got out of whack and they couldn't do it. I think that's exactly what they're going to do as well.
If they do throw, I think these guys can have success, especially Jennings. Any wide receiver who gets 8 or more targets against the Bears has a big game, but it's only happened 5 times. Start George Kittle.
It may very well come down to how effective is Isaac Garendo in the first half. If he comes out,
or Patrick Taylor, or Abanikanda, or whoever they decide to go back there.
Well, I'd be shocked if it was Abanikanda, and I would be shocked if it's Patrick Taylor, because I think Taylor has 8 touches this year. And Garendo just looks like the better running back.
For sure, Garendo. But I'm just saying they're going to use somebody else.
For sure. And my guess is that it's going to be Taylor on 3rd downs. But if Garendo comes out hot, that's bad for Purdy. If Garendo is just okay or bad, that's going to be bad for everybody that started Garendo. I'm going to look like a fool for having him ranked where I have him ranked. But that'll mean Purdy throws a lot in the second half.
All right, we got to take a break. Start George Kittle and the 49ers. We don't really like the DSTs in this game. So sit the DSTs if you can.
No Bears DST. There's also a chance here that the Niners offense just explodes. They've been terrible, obviously, 2 games ago without Purdy. And then last week, they could explode this week and have a monster game.
They hopefully will, but they can implode also. I mean, they're on the brink of either packing it in or still, trying to make a run. I hope the latter, because again, given what this team has dealt with, you like to see them,
Agreed. I'd be shocked if they imploded.
Will the real 49ers please stand up? This is a very interesting week for them. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today.
Historic rivals with unforgettable seasons meet in a game of honor. The Army-Navy game presented by USAA, December 14th on CBS.
By the way, I said, will the real 49ers please stand up? You guys get that reference, right? It's clueless. Okay, Atlanta at Minnesota.
I was thinking Slim Shady.
Oh, yeah, no, it is. All right, Atlanta at Minnesota. Word of the game is gratitude. That's what Kirk Cousins said he would have in his return to Minnesota. He was very complimentary of his time there. It was actually really cool. I would love to be rooting for Kirk Cousins, but my God, did he look bad last week? I don't know what happened to his arm, but just like throwing these lollipops all over the field. So that's the word of the game is gratitude. Stat of the game is Aaron Jones has 1 run longer than 13 yards in his last 6 games. So to make this game sort of simpler here, you are not going to start Kirk Cousins. You are going to start Bijan Robinson, although I wish this were a better matchup. He might not have his best game, but start Bijan, sit Algier. Drake London, you guys are pretty different on him. So Jamie, unless the rankings have changed, you have him 6th, Jake London?
Love him this week.
Okay, and Dave, you have him as a starter, but more like 17th, I believe.
I think he's lower than that.
Okay, so let's talk about Drake London then. Jamie, why do you love him so much?
Getting fed targets against a secondary that's given us a lot of production to receivers. So as bad as Cousins was last week, London's still giving you the numbers that you're looking for. I just hope he can find the end zone once. Please get back to scoring touchdowns again, because that's been the problem for Kirk Cousins. Hasn't thrown a touchdown in 3 games. But the way that this game should unfold, where they're most likely chasing points by a lot, I think we're going to see London's targets continue to be up, and matchup is very much in his favor. I think the Vikings are still top 3 in most fantasy points allowed to the position.
Does he still get 16 targets? Because that's what he had last week. And 17.6 PPR points is great, but I don't know if he's going to get that many. If you tell me 10 targets, I believe that in a heartbeat. I think Minnesota's going to try and pressure the hell out of Kirk Cousins. So easy guy to throw too short is going to be Drake London. Not a lot of good efficiency after that. And that makes a big difference when we're talking PPR versus non-PPR. And I'm just worried about the volume being as gaudy as it was in week 13.
Week 10, 13 targets. Week 11 against Surtain, when he left the game in the second half, 7 targets. He was on the way
you
to the
can
game.
throw that one out because that's not like this game at all.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting 10 targets.
No, you're starting Drake London. It's just a matter of, are you expecting a monster game or are you expecting, like what he did last week, maybe a little bit less? And I'm going to say it's going to be a little bit less.
He still has 11 end zone targets. That's 6th best in the NFL. And the Vikings do give up actually the most fantasy points to wide receivers. But they're the opposite of the Bears. They are actually a solid pass defense that just gets thrown on all the time because their run defense is so good. Whereas the Bears are not that good of a pass defense, but they get thrown on so little because their run defense is so bad. So Mooney is a guy that, like, I came into the week pretty much ready to forgive last week. Bad week for Mooney. 3 catches for 20 yards on 6 targets. I went back and I watched his targets. I mean, he's open for a touchdown at the 5-yard line. And Cousins, I don't know if he was pressured, makes just a horrible throw. He's open for a 20-yard gain, I think, in the 3rd quarter. Cousins, like, one hops it, basically. Kirk Cousins, he hasn't been, I know he hasn't had a good year, but he was so bad last week. Had to be his worst game of the year since week 1 anyway.
And he's had some bad games this year.
And I don't know what to make of it because, like, if Cousins can just be
good,
I think Mooney can be good too. But if he can be okay, then Mooney can be good. But he was so bad last week.
I think he's just, old, and we're at the end of the season, and his line isn't good, and defenses know that they can pressure him, and he'll make mistakes with that.
Yeah, so not to be on.
And there's been a velocity. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there's been a velocity issue on his throws all year long.
Yeah, last week
He looked like a pitcher throwing an 80-mile-an-hour fastball on the 2 interceptions. The 2 of the interceptions. The one in the back of the end zone was one of the stupidest.
Oh my gosh!
You can't explain that throw. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, it's happening again. You know what? I think it's probably not an animal. It might be like the heater or something. Okay. Anyway,
You have a heater in your daughter's bedroom?
No, that's why I'm so confused. All right, so when it comes to Mooney, would you start him over the 49ers wide receivers?
Yes.
Debo, yes. Jawan, no.
Okay. Sit Kyle Pitts. Sam Darnold is a must-start quarterback.
What a sentence.
Have we spoken about any quarterbacks that you'd start over Sam Darnold today? Like not starting Caleb or Purdy or Kyler?
Not one, believe it or not.
Yeah, you got to have a stud to sit Sam Darnold. All right. Start or sit Aaron Jones?
Start.
Agreed. But number 2, I'd rather start Garendo. I'd rather start Tony Pollard.
Well, we love Pollard this week, right?
Yeah.
Tyrone Tracy or Aaron Jones?
Jones.
Close, but I have Jones a little bit higher.
Start Justin Jefferson. What about Jordan Addison against the Falcons, who give up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers?
He's in that same range as Mooney and Jennings for me. High end number 3 receiver.
I will have Jennings a little bit higher in full PPR, but yes, he's definitely one of those number 3 receivers who could boom or could bust.
TJ Hawkinson. I don't even okay, what is he going to do this week? I could get the back ball out. Starter said Hawkinson.
Low end starter. I take the Tucker Kraft 13.1 if you told me right now.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if Hawkinson can get to 13.1. And I would have started Kraft over Hawkinson. Honestly, if I had to make the decision, that's what I would have done. If Atlanta had come out of their bye playing a lot of zone coverage like they had been in their first however many games it was, 11 games, then I'd be more intrigued with Hawkinson. But they really threw a curveball at the Chargers last week. They played a lot more man coverage. It's something that they weren't doing at the beginning of the year, and they were getting to the quarterback. We talked about this on Sunday. 5 sacks from this Falcons defense. They came into the matchup with just 10 on the year. And so if they're going to play a lot of man coverage, I think that works against Hawkinson. Whereas if it's zone coverage and they're playing deep, Hawkinson can just get check down throws and become a PPR stud that way. He's a low-end guy for me. For now, he's over Otten. That would flip if there's no Mike Evans. And then he's ahead of all the streaming guys plus Kyle Pitts.
I got a question from the chat. Mahomes or Darnold?
Darnold, but it's close.
Just saying it is crazy, but This is a game of stats, right?
Yep.
I'm taking Darnold.
Okay. And I have a comment from the chat in all caps. I hate Jaden Reed. Yeah, I get that. I'm sorry.
Everybody's with you, KG.
All right. Minnesota's DST is top 2 for Dave and Jamie. They've actually struggled the last couple of weeks, but they've been very good this season. Carolina's at Philadelphia. Speaking of good defenses, Philadelphia has held 7 of their last 8 opponents to 20 or fewer points. Let's get to the stat of the game here, and it's about Devontae Smith. And, we like him without Dallas Goedert typically, but I just want to bring this up. Dallas Goedert, I'll just give his target share. Dallas Goedert's target share in the last 4 games has been 19.5%. Grant Calcaterra's target share in the 4 games before that was 16.3%. So it's kind of like 1 extra target per game for Goedert over Calcaterra. Big difference, though, is that Calcaterra does not have a red zone or end zone target, and Dallas Goedert does factor in that area this season. But usually like, oh yeah, Goddard's out, let's go with Smith. 2 problems I have with that is what I just gave, the stat about Calcaterra, and the other thing is they're throwing 21 times a game since their bye, something like that. Let's talk about Devontae Smith with Darnell Mooney and Juwan Jennings and Jordan Addison. Is he ahead of that group?
Right smack dab in the middle.
Same canoe, but toward the back for me.
Okay. So you're on the same page as me. He's not a slam dunk must start, Devontae Smith.
I've got Deebo Samuel ahead of him.
Yeah, I'm not there, but I think this is the setup that you like. Again, when there's been somebody missing over the last 2+ seasons, he's had big performances. And so is this an opportunity for him to have a big performance? Look, this is one of those teams where everything looks bad statistically from a passing standpoint because teams run all over them. And clearly this is the best running back in football right now with Saquon Barkley. So he can easily have a huge game, would not be a surprise. But I still think you're looking at 6 teams on a bye, somebody missing for Philadelphia, chance for him to make a big play or two. Like he's a high-end number 3 receiver.
Well, in case you didn't know, based on my reaction yesterday to a sound above my head, I am a huge coward. And I played fantasy football like a coward last night. I share my FFT team with Brandon, who donated very generously to St. Jude. And I texted him. I said, should we start Goff over Jalen Hurts? I kind of, like, probably not, right? And he's like, you know what? Let's go for it. Let's go out on our own terms. And I got a phone call like right before the game started, and I missed his text, so I didn't do it. And I wish I had, because you guys are not worried about Hurts, right?
I mean, he could run for 2 touchdowns here if he wants.
Yeah, like if he wasn't running as much, I would head for the hills on Hurts. But
and I'm not really worried either. But it's like we would never, if he were going into the season, and I told you, Jalen Hurts is going to average 21 pass attempts per game. 21.5. That's what he's averaging in his last 8 games. We would, and by the way, he has a running back who might win the MVP. We would never rank that player as a top 5 quarterback, right? There's just not enough opportunity. And he's scored fewer than 20 fantasy points in 3 straight games because Saquon Barkley has 5 touchdowns in those 3 games. And he never throws the ball. And by the way, they have the best defense in football, and they're playing the Panthers. So this is one of those, like, I'm not thrilled about starting Jalen Hurts, but there's no way I could take him out of my lineup.
Exactly.
I do think from a profile, it is so interesting, what they're doing right now and what it means for fantasy points. Because if he's not getting rushing touchdowns, he's doing almost nothing. And no, that's not true. He's just not doing that much. And it's frustrating the heck out of A.J. Brown managers, too, because he's not being as good as he can be. But you know what? I will say this for Hurts. One of the differences the last few weeks is no Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith's been making these big plays downfield. Maybe we'll get that back.
That's a good point.
All right. Anyway, you know what you're doing with the Eagles. Hurts, people are going to start. Barkley. Starter sit Barkley. Well, we'll start Barkley. Let's start Barkley. Start Brown, and Devontae Smith's the number 3 receiver. So are there any Panthers that you want to start this week, guys?
No, but before we go there, I do think that there's an opportunity here for, if you're desperate, like you are, Adam, Kenneth Gainwell. They're 12-point favorites. He's gotten some opportunities. I think it's like 5 to 7. There you go. 5 to 7, touches pretty consistently, and scored a touchdown last week. Would not be surprising if he's playing a lot in the 4th quarter.
is it him or is it Will Shipley?
Oh, it's him.
Yeah, I think that it seems like
I'm not so sure if it's going to be him in the fourth quarter. Like if you're debating Charbonnet versus Gainwell and Walker is active, I'm taking Charbonnet over Gainwell.
I agree.
Yeah, but who's going to come in when Saquon Barkley has a 71-yard run, gets tackled at the 2-yard line, and needs a breather? That's going to be Gainwell. That's
going to be Jalen Hurts getting pushed in.
Oh, sorry, the 4-yard line. The 4-yard line. Okay, so Chuba Hubbard though is someone that we should spend a little time on. And by the way, Grant Calcaterra has 8 or more PPR fantasy points in 3 of 4 games without Goddard. But Chuba Hubbard, Dave, I know Jamie doesn't like Chuba Hubbard. How do you feel about him?
I feel the same way. Low end, number 2 fantasy running back. You're hoping that he sees maybe a few more touches than he got last week. But I think the Jonathan Brooks takeover is too strong of a word. The Jonathan Brooks participation is real. And I actually thought Brooks looked pretty good. He had a great pass pro rep, caught 3 passes, showed off his speed on those catches. And I bet he gets implemented just a little bit more into the Carolina offense. And if this game is out of hand and if the game script is what we think it is, I don't think you'll see Chuba Hubbard on the field at all in the fourth quarter. I think you'll see a lot more of Jonathan Brooks. All that being said, I'm starting Hubbard over Brooks. I'm starting Hubbard over any running back that I'm real skittish of, but it's with a lot of trepidation. We've talked poorly about Connor, Swift. We're not huge fans of Kenneth Gainwell. Man, all those guys ahead of Chuba Hubbard this week.
Wait, Kenneth Walker, not Kenneth Gainwell.
Kenneth Walker, I'm sorry.
I would start Amir Abdullah over Chuba Hubbard this week in PPR if Madison is out.
Wow.
I am not there yet.
It's like I said to Jamie yesterday that Chuba's not catching passes lately, but he is playing a lot on third down. He's playing a lot in general, just not throwing to him.
Well, I'll give you the stat for Abdullah that I gave you yesterday. The Bucks have allowed 10 running backs this season to score at least 7 PPR points with just their receiving totals alone.
It's a great stat. All right, let's go to start the Eagles DST. Let's go to the Bengals and the Cowboys here. So
I low-key thought that you were going to make this the game of the week.
It's a good call. It could be a lot of fun. Start Burrow, start Chase, start Brown, start Higgins, sit Gesicki. How do we feel about Dowdle and Lamb? Who do you like better, Dowdle or Lamb?
Dowdle.
I believe I have Lamb ranked higher in my PPR flex rankings.
I love the setup for him without Logan Wilson there. Could not be better. You look what the Steelers running backs just did last week. They did whatever they wanted to.
Yeah. So here's my only concern with that is, and I do think the Cowboys can hang around here. We're talking about a pretty bad Bengals team.
Hang around. They may win.
They might, but they're also they also stink. Like the Cowboys are terrible.
They do.
And they don't. I think he doesn't have more than 12 carries in any loss this year. So, do you think the game? I'm just going to bring it up. You think the game is competitive enough where they are able to stick with the run and Rico Dowdle?
Yes, I mean this Bengals defense is historically bad. It's just so awful, and I don't think Sheldon Rankins is healthy yet, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I don't believe he's practiced. I can double check it.
So he's been dealing with an illness. So it's potentially he could potentially come back. But I mean, you just think about it. He's also involved in the passing game. I know it's not the same as it was with Dak Prescott for Dowdle, so that's still a part of this. But 3 catches is well within reach. I mean, Najee had 6 catches, was running wide open rushing lanes. Jalen Warren 10+ PPR points. Cordero Patterson 8+ PPR points. Like there's nobody else taking work away from Dowdle right now that scares you. So this should be a monster game for him.
You like him or Guerrero?
Rankins didn't practice on Thursday.
Guerrero or Dowdle? He did not practice.
I did not. I like Dowdle one spot ahead of Grendo.
I've got Grendo higher.
All right, start these guys. So do you like Lamb?
Yeah.
I mean, I prefer beef, chicken, turkey.
Lamb and tuna fish? Name that movie.
Oh,
you prefer lamb and tuna fish, I think is the line. That is Big Daddy, Rob Schneider. Rob Schneider is. All right, so start Lamb. He's top 30.
The easy ones.
Yeah, exactly. Lamb is top 14 for everyone.
Hip Hop Anonymous?
Hip Hop Anonymous? Yeah, so Lamb is getting a ton of targets. Hopefully he can catch a touchdown.
I've got McConkey, Judy, Jacoby. If he plays DJ Moore, all ahead of CeeDee Lamb this week.
Okay, but you have them pretty high.
I do.
That's not a knock on Lamb.
No, it's not a knock on Lamb.
Anfo wants us to rank Lamb, Brian Thomas Jr., and Malik Neighbors.
Lamb, Neighbors, Thomas.
Lamb, Thomas, Gap, Neighbors.
Okay. Beef or lamb Euro, asks Hayden. He says beef and lamb, but if you had to pick.
Oh, yeah, that's the good stuff.
Yes.
Lamb Euro is
Euro.
pretty good. Yeah. We already talked about Jake Ferguson. He is a start this week. We would take him over Kyle Pitts and Evan Ingram.
All those streamers. I would take him over Ingram. That Logan Wilson being out, that's great for Dowdle, no question, but it's great for the tight ends too. And they've been bad against tight. Logan Wilson wasn't a great cover guy anyway, but the guy that's replacing him, I think it's Akeem Davis-Gaither. He's even worse. So there's a real favorable matchup here for the Cowboys to take advantage of.
Okay, I was wrong. Jamie has Ingram ahead of Ferguson, but
In PPR, yes.
I think I would. I think I would start Ferguson over Otten if Mike Evans plays. Now, obviously not if Evans doesn't play.
Yeah, I agree.
Jamie does not agree. All right, and the DSTs, don't start the DSTs. New Orleans is at the Giants. Stat of the game: these two teams allow the most yards per carry to running backs. They're the two worst run defenses in football by that metric here. And so are you starting any Saints other than Kamara?
No, MVS if you're desperate, and Juwan Johnson if you're desperate. Hopefully he's healthy. Dealing with an injury the last 2 days. I forget what the injury is, but you're looking at for whatever it's worth, the Giants still just don't give up production to tight ends. You know, that Dallas game was fascinating to me because Schoonmaker was 5 for 33 on the first 2 drives, and he finished the game with 5 for 33. So
no, honestly, this is what you need to know about the Giants. I think they've seen the second fewest pass attempts per game, right? Like teams run on them all the time. It makes them look like they're good against tight ends, and they're not even that bad against receivers. They're 11th best against receivers, but it's not because of personnel. It's because they're running.
No, I agree. That's what I'm saying. It's one of those things where statistically this just works for them.
Yeah, but now no Bobby Okereke, it looks like. Deontay.
No Dexter Lawrence.
No Dexter Lawrence, that's the biggest one.
That's the absolute biggest one. I think Alvin Kamara might have the best day of anybody in fantasy football, regardless of position.
Yeah, he should have a big game. And Derek Carr is a streamer. Like he probably could have a good game if he wants to, but he just won't need to. There's one concern I have with Tracy, and let's see how it plays out. I think if anybody wants to look this up, I think his catches last week came on the last drive, and Drew Lock has a much lower running back target rate throughout his career than Tommy DeVito. It's 14.5% his running back target rate. That's very low. DeVito's is 22%, which is very high. And only 2 catches last week at Dallas in what ended up being a 7-point loss, but it was basically a blowout loss. They scored.
One was in the second quarter. One was in the 2-minute drill in the second quarter. One was in the fourth quarter with 3:24 to play.
Okay.
Both for at least 15 yards. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, so I just want to keep an eye on that because Locke just doesn't throw to his running backs. But you guys do like Tyrone Tracy as a mid-range number 2 running back. All right, so you're not going to start Wandale or Slayton. What about Malik Neighbors, who had 15.3 fantasy points, 8 catches for 69 yards, but over his last 7 games, he is the number 30 wide receiver per game in full PPR, number 42 per game in half PPR. Dave, starter sit Malik Neighbors.
I would use him as a number 2 wide receiver in full PPR and maybe like a fringe number 2, number 3 receiver in non-PPR. All of his targets are short. He's not getting a lot of work downfield. If he does, he's not catching those passes. Certainly not getting touchdowns. Everybody knows that. Since his concussion, he hasn't scored. He told the media that the concussion injury has nothing to do with how he's playing. It's just all about play calling and the routes he's running. And, you know, he tried to be a good soldier about it. But it's a favorable matchup. But to me, it starts with the quarterback. And Drew Lock's terrible and Tommy DeVito's terrible. The offensive line, even if they get Illuminor and Evan Neal playing, I don't think it's great. I think the Saints defense is going to look a lot better than they really are in this game. And I think Malik Neighbors will have high volume, a lot of catches, not great efficiency. You will be lucky if he can break away for a touchdown.
All right, I've thought about this all week. I'm going to go for it. Malik Neighbors is going to have 80 yards and a touchdown. He's going to have his best game in 8
Let's
weeks.
go.
Yeah, I'm feeling it. And yeah, I can say that I think that he is too talented to be this bad. The stat that really jumps out to me is his yak. He's averaging, I think, 1.5 yards after the catch, 1.9 yards after catch per reception. He has 1 red zone and 1 end zone target in his last 7 games. All of these things need to change. It just can't be this bad for this long. It's not a 3-game thing. Like, it's ridiculous. And he's too talented to have 2 yards after the catch per reception. So there is a big play waiting to be had. It's time. It's going to happen. And call it a gut feeling, Dave. Like, it just is what it is.
Okay. He has yet to see a target of 20-plus air yards since Daniel Jones was benched, cut, whatever. He's only seen 8 targets with 0 catches on I'm trying to read what I wrote here. He only saw 8 with 0 catches in the 4 games prior to the benching. So even when Daniel Jones was playing, he was barely seeing deep targets. Now that Daniel Jones isn't playing, he's not seeing deep targets. So for him to have one of those big plays, he's got to catch the ball and then make a play after the catch and break away from the Saints defense. Is that possible? Yeah, but you just talked about his yards after catch per reception being in the toilet. And so that he makes me nervous in that regard.
Yeah.
He makes me nervous in non-PPR. He's had great matchups before this week.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nothing but great matchups. I would start Brian Thomas Jr. over him, though.
I would too.
Question. I know Jamie would not, but I'm just going to throw it out there and let's make it happen. And honestly, I think most people are going to start Neighbors anyway, so you can't blame me if he stinks. And at least he gives you in PPR, he gives you a floor, right? Like, he's usually at least 12 points per game in full PPR. He's been 12 or more in 4 of his last 5 games. That's it for today's show. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody. Have a great day. Oh, last question. Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr.? Can answer that.
Neighbors.
I'm going to double check the rankings. I've got MHJ over Neighbors.
The Neighbors are Juwan Jennings from Chris.
Neighbors.
Juwan 1 spot ahead of Neighbors.
Have a great day. See ya on Sunday morning. Bye.